The night bled silver beneath a sky that couldn't decide if it was thunder or sorrow. Rain came down in waves, heavy, uneven, almost alive, hammering against tin roofs and overflowing gutters until the whole street looked like it was drowning in its own reflection. A single yellow umbrella bobbed through the storm, tilting and trembling with every gust of wind. It was small, patched at the edges, its handle wrapped in faded tape, but to the little girl holding it, it was a shield. Amara Daniels, 10 years old, moved quickly along the cracked pavement, her sneakers slapping puddles that splashed up to her shins. The grocery bag in her hand was half empty, bread, a few cans, a carton of milk already leaking from the corner. She clutched it tight against her chest. Her coat was too thin. Her socks had long since given up trying to stay dry. Still, she kept her chin high. Somewhere far off, lightning tore the sky in two, white veins flashing through bruised clouds, and for half a heartbeat, the whole neighborhood glowed in pale light. Amara ducked her head and muttered to herself, almost home, just a few more blocks. Her voice was swallowed by the rain. Then she heard it, faint, fragile, a cry. At first, she thought it was the wind bending through the alleyways, but then it came again, sharper, desperate. Help! She stopped. The umbrella tilted slightly in her hands, rain spilling down her shoulder. Her heart began to beat faster. "Is someone there?" she whispered. No answer, just the hiss of water against asphalt. She looked up the street. To her left, a row of shuttered stores, windows dark, signs flickering with dying light. To her right, the old park. Half the lamps there were broken, the others glowing dimly through sheets of rain. Another cry. Louder this time. Closer. Somebody. Please, help. Amara's grip on the grocery bag tightened. She knew that voice didn't sound grown, it was small, scared, like hers. Her mother's warning echoed in her head, don't stop for strangers, especially at night. But she couldn't move forward either. Not while someone was out there calling into the storm. The rain soaked through her sleeves, the cold biting down to her bones. She turned toward the park. Through the blur of rain, she could just make out the outline of a black sedan, parked awkwardly near the curb, one headlight flickering weakly. Beside it, something metallic glinted under the street lamp, a wheelchair, tilted dangerously near the edge of the sidewalk. Amara squinted. There, a small figure struggling, arms flailing against the wheels that refused to move. The sound came again, broken and panicked. Help me. Please. For a heartbeat, she froze. Her feet refused to move. Her house was only 3 blocks away, a light, a meal, safety. She looked back down the road. Empty. Not a single soul. The city had gone quiet except for the rain. Please. That one word tore through her hesitation. Amara shifted the grocery bag under her arm, adjusted her slippery grip on the umbrella, and ran. Her shoes slapped through puddles, sending muddy water up her legs. The cold sliced through her lungs. Every breath came out sharp, white in the air. When she reached the curb, she could see him clearly now, a boy, maybe 8 or 9, pale-faced and shaking, water running down his hair and into his eyes. The left wheel of his chair was jammed deep in a pothole. Amara's breath came in short gasps. "It's okay," she called out, trying to sound braver than she felt. "I'm here." He looked up, startled, blinking through the rain. My chair's stuck," he said, his voice trembling. "I can't move." Amara nodded quickly, setting her umbrella aside under the flickering light. "We'll get you out, don't worry." She crouched low, trying to find leverage on the slippery ground. Her fingers wrapped around the cold metal rim. It wouldn't budge. She tried again, pushing harder this time. Mud squelched under her shoes. The wheel moved an inch, then slipped back, splattering her jeans. The rain intensified, thunder rolling close overhead. She wiped her face with her sleeve, gasping. "It's really stuck, huh?" He gave a shaky laugh that sounded almost like a sob. "My dad went to make a call. He said he'd be right back, but the car, it just stopped working." "It's okay," Amara said again, though her voice quivered. "We'll fix it before he gets back." Her small hands pushed against the handles again. Her arms ached. The wheel refused to move. She bit her lip, looked around, found a flat stone near the curb, and jammed it beneath the wheel, trying to get traction. "Ready?" she said. He nodded. She counted softly, 1, 2, 3. She pushed. He pulled on the other side. With a wet pop, the wheel came free, sending both of them splashing backward into the mud. For a second, they just sat there, drenched, panting, staring at each other in disbelief. Then the boy started laughing. It was small at first, then louder, pure, bright laughter cutting through the sound of the storm. Amara smiled despite herself, wiping rain from her eyes. "You okay?" He nodded. You did it." "We did it," she corrected, standing up and brushing dirt from her palms. "You helped too." She picked up her umbrella, holding it above his head first before herself. "You'll get sick," she said. The boy smiled faintly. "You'll get wet." "I already am." For a moment, under that broken yellow umbrella, they shared a silence that felt warm in a world of cold. Rain hit the canopy like applause. Amara glanced toward the car. Its headlights flickered again, faintly illuminating the boy's face. His skin was pale against the dark night, his clothes too fine for this part of town, a pressed white shirt now clinging to his thin frame. "Where's your dad?" she asked quietly. He pointed toward the shadows behind the car. "There. I think." He was trying to call someone. Amara frowned, scanning the empty street. No figure in sight. Just the hum of the rain and the dull pulse of the street lamp above them. She opened her mouth to speak again, but thunder cracked across the sky, loud, sharp, final. She flinched, then steadied herself, smiling again for the boy's sake. "It's gonna be fine," she said softly. "You're safe now." The boy looked at her, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Why did you stop?" Amara blinked. "What do you mean? You didn't know me. You could have kept going." She hesitated, then shrugged with a shy smile. "My mom says, when you hear someone cry, you listen. That's all." The boy looked at her for a long moment, rain dripping from his chin. Then, almost in a whisper, "You're different." Before Amara could answer, a door slammed. A man's voice, deep, commanding, cut through the storm. "Daniel." Amara's heart lurched. The boy's face went pale. "Dad." The sound of heavy footsteps approached, fast, splashing through puddles. Amara turned toward the car, her umbrella trembling in her hands. Lightning flashed again, and the tall figure came into view. Even through the rain, his presence filled the street. A dark coat. Sharp eyes. Jaw clenched. He stopped a few feet away, gaze locked on her. "What the hell do you think you're doing with my son?" The man's voice cracked through the storm like thunder itself. Amara froze, her hand still on the wheelchair's handle. The boy, Daniel, turned toward his father, his voice trembling. "Dad, she." But the man, Richard Hale, had already closed the distance. He knelt by his son, his expensive shoes sinking into the muddy street. The smell of cologne and rain mixed sharply as he inspected Daniel's trembling hands, the dirt on his cuffs, the streak of mud across his cheek. "What did she do to you?" he demanded, not even glancing at Amara. "Dad, stop," Daniel tried again, but his father's tone cut like glass. "Answer me, son. Did she touch you? Did she hurt you?" Amara took a small step back, the umbrella shaking in her hands. Her throat tightened, words forming but never leaving. I didn't, she finally managed, her voice small, swallowed by the rain. I was helping him. The chair was stuck. Richard finally turned his gaze toward her. In the glare of the car's flickering headlight, his eyes looked like steel, cold, sharp, untrusting. Helping? His tone dripped with disbelief. You expect me to believe that? Daniel gripped his father's sleeve. Dad, she did help me. The wheel was. Enough, Daniel. Richard's voice softened slightly for his son, but the anger didn't fade. I leave you alone for 2 minutes and find some stranger with her hands on you in the dark. What am I supposed to think? The accusation stung. Amara's lip quivered, rain streaking down her cheeks, mixing with something warmer. She stepped forward a little, her voice trembling. Sir. I swear I wasn't trying to hurt him. He called for help. I couldn't just walk away. Richard's jaw tightened. He stood, towering over her, his expensive coat glistening under the streetlight. You think I don't know how the world works, girl? People see a nice car, a helpless kid, and think it's an opportunity. Her eyes widened. No. But he cut her off again. Go home before I call someone to handle this properly. The last word, properly, landed like a slap. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Dad, stop. She saved me. Richard ignored him, moving to push the wheelchair toward the car. Get inside, he said. Daniel resisted, twisting in his seat. I won't go until you say thank you. Richard froze for a brief moment. Rain pounded against his shoulders. The headlights hummed. He didn't turn around. Daniel. Say it, the boy whispered. Just say it. The man's hands gripped the wheelchair tighter. His voice dropped low. We're leaving. Amara stood still, her umbrella sagging under the weight of the storm. The groceries she had carried so carefully now lay half scattered at her feet, bread soggy, the milk carton leaking into the gutter. Her heart felt heavier than her soaked clothes. She wanted to shout that she wasn't a thief. That she wasn't what he thought she was. But no words came. The humiliation sat thick in her chest. As the car door opened and the boy was lifted inside, Daniel's eyes found hers through the rain. He mouthed, I'm sorry. Amara tried to smile back, but it came out broken. The car engine sputtered to life. Water sprayed as the tires turned. The headlights caught her one last time before the car disappeared into the dark, leaving nothing behind but ripples and silence. Her umbrella slipped from her fingers, falling into the mud with a dull thud. She stared at it for a long time, the yellow fabric half submerged, the color dull and lifeless under the rain. She knelt, picked it up, and held it close to her chest. The ribs were bent, one hinge broken clean through. Still, she folded it carefully, as if it were something fragile, something worth keeping. For a long moment, she stood there in the middle of the empty street, a small girl holding a broken umbrella, rain pooling around her shoes. A whisper escaped her lips. I was just trying to help. Thunder answered her, deep and distant. She took a deep breath, forcing her shaking legs to move. One step, then another. The weight of the night pressed on her shoulders. Each puddle reflected fragments of her face, a child who'd done right, yet somehow ended up wrong. By the time she turned the corner toward home, her groceries were gone, her shoes were soaked, and the yellow umbrella dangled from her hand like a wilted flower. The rain began to ease. But for Amara, it didn't matter. The storm had already moved inside her. The next morning dawned gray, as though the storm had wrung all color from the sky. Rainwater still pooled in potholes, catching dull reflections of passing cars. The air smelled of wet earth and rust, the scent of everything washed clean but still heavy with yesterday's hurt. Amara sat at the small kitchen table, tracing circles on the wood grain with her fingertip. Her mother, Lydia, moved around the kitchen, humming faintly while packing lunch boxes for work. The sound should have been comforting, but Amara couldn't focus on it. "You're quiet this morning," Lydia said finally, glancing up. "Did something happen on your way home last night?" Amara hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her chair. She wanted to say it, to tell her how she'd helped a boy in a wheelchair, how his father had looked at her like she was something dirty. But the words tangled in her throat. "No," she lied softly. "Just tired." Lydia studied her for a moment longer but didn't press. She sighed and set a warm slice of toast in front of her daughter. "Eat, sweetheart. The world's rough enough on an empty stomach." Amara forced a smile and took a bite. It tasted like nothing. By noon, she was on her way to school, her patched umbrella tucked under her arm, the same yellow fabric now cleaned and repaired with tape. She walked quickly, head down, her backpack bumping against her shoulder blades. Halfway down the street, she slowed, her gaze catching on a large billboard across from the community center. It showed a man in a suit, sharp, confident, smiling faintly under bold printed letters. Richard Hale Foundation. Building hope for disabled children. Her stomach twisted. The same man from last night. The same eyes that had burned through her in the rain. She remembered his words, "Go home before I call someone to handle this properly." Her hands clenched around the umbrella. For a brief second, anger sparked beneath her skin, but it fizzled into sadness. She whispered under her breath, "I didn't do anything wrong." That afternoon, while she waited for the bus home, a small voice called her name. "Amara." She turned, and there he was. Daniel. Clean now, dressed neatly in a gray sweater and blue scarf, the same one she'd noticed hanging loose that night. He was sitting in his wheelchair at the curb, a driver waiting nearby in a black car. Amara blinked in disbelief. What are you doing here?" He grinned shyly. "Dad had a meeting. I told him I wanted to see the park. He didn't know I meant this park." Amara glanced around nervously. "If he finds out." "He won't." "Not yet." Daniel looked down, then back up with a smile that was both innocent and bold. "I wanted to thank you, for helping me." Her chest loosened a little. She smiled, small but real. "You don't have to." "I do," he insisted. "You didn't even know me, and you didn't run away. You're kind." The word kind sounded strange to her, like something out of place in her day. She ducked her head, cheeks warming. "Thanks." He looked over his shoulder, then lowered his voice. "I wanted to give you this." From his pocket, he pulled a folded piece of paper, a sketch, done in pencil. It showed a small girl under a yellow umbrella, holding it above another child in a wheelchair. Beneath it, in careful handwriting, it read, "Thank you for not leaving." Amara blinked hard, her throat tightening. "You drew this?" He nodded proudly. "Mom used to draw. I'm not as good as her, but—" "Daniel." The voice sliced through the air like a blade. They both turned. Richard Hale was striding toward them, coat flaring, expression stormy. The driver trailed behind him, calling for calm, but Richard's fury was already breaking loose. "What did I tell you about wandering off?" he snapped, stopping in front of the wheelchair. His gaze shifted to Amara, and the recognition hit. "You again." Amara's pulse jumped. She clutched the umbrella tighter. Richard's tone was sharper than the cold wind. "What is it this time? Looking for attention? You think following my son is a game?" I wasn't." Daniel spoke up quickly. "Dad, please, she wasn't following me. I came here. I wanted to say thank you." Richard ignored him. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" he hissed at Amara. "I could have you arrested for bothering my family." Her eyes widened, panic flickering beneath humiliation. A few pedestrians had already slowed nearby, whispering, watching. The attention made everything worse. She tried to speak, but her voice came out small, broken. I was just... Richard stepped forward, his voice rising. Just what? Pretending to care again? You people think pity earns you something? The crowd murmured. A woman gasped softly. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Dad, stop. Amara's shoulders trembled. Please, I only came to say hi. That's all. But it didn't matter. Richard's anger wasn't about her, it was about everything he hadn't faced in himself. And now she was standing in the path of it. He waved toward the driver. Get him in the car. Daniel tried to resist, clutching the drawing. No. You don't understand. The driver hesitated, torn. Amara took a step back, chest tight, vision blurring from tears she refused to let fall. I didn't do anything wrong, she whispered again, but the words drowned in the noise. As the car door closed and the black sedan pulled away, her reflection flashed for a second in the window, small, broken, alone again. When the silence finally settled, she looked down at her hand. The drawing was still there, crumpled, wet from the rain that had begun again without warning. She unfolded it carefully. The pencil lines had begun to blur, the words smudged. Still, she pressed it against her chest as if trying to protect it from the world. The yellow umbrella hung limp at her side. Its ribs bent further, one seam beginning to tear. The whispers from the bystanders still lingered in the air. No one had stepped forward. No one had said a word. Amara turned and walked away slowly, her small frame swallowed by the city that refused to see her. Behind her, the puddles rippled with every drop of new rain, as though even the sky felt sorry. Thunder rolled far in the distance that evening, but inside the Hale mansion, there was nothing but silence. Silence so heavy it seemed to have weight. The marble floors reflected the golden chandelier light, each flicker of the flame trembling faintly across polished surfaces. Every corner was spotless, too spotless, as if life itself had been scrubbed out of the house along with the dust. Richard Hale stood by the tall glass window overlooking the rain-soaked garden. He held a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched in an hour. The ice had melted, leaving the liquid thin and tasteless. He didn't notice. Behind him, a clock ticked softly, the kind of expensive antique meant to fill quiet spaces. But even that sound irritated him tonight. Dinner is ready, sir, said Catherine, the housekeeper, appearing in the doorway. He didn't turn. Where's Daniel? In his room, she replied carefully. He said he wasn't hungry. Richard's jaw tightened. He'll eat when I say it's time to eat. Yes, sir. But when he finally turned, the look on her face, a mix of worry and disappointment, made his throat tighten for just a second. He waved her away. Leave it. I'll speak to him. She nodded and left without a word. The hall to Daniel's room felt endless, lined with framed photos of smiling faces, photos Richard hadn't had the heart to take down, though each one hurt to look at. His late wife, Evelyn, smiled from nearly every frame. Her eyes, warm, alive, met his every step he took down that hall, and it burned. He stopped at the last photo, Evelyn sitting on the grass, Daniel on her lap, tiny and giggling, a yellow balloon floating behind them. Richard looked at it for a long moment, the glass reflecting his frown like a ghost of who he used to be. Finally, he knocked once on Daniel's door. Daniel? No answer. He opened it slowly. The boy sat by the window, his wheelchair turned toward the rain. The blue scarf from that night hung neatly over the chair arm. On his lap rested the crumpled sketch, the same one Amara had held. Daniel, Richard said, keeping his voice firm but quiet. You can't just disappear like that. You scared me. You yelled at her again, Daniel said softly, not turning. Richard's breath caught. She was kind. The words landed like stones dropped in water, quiet, but heavy enough to sink deep. She was helping me, Daniel continued. Why do you always think the worst of people? Richard ran a hand through his hair, pacing a few steps. Because people are the worst, Daniel. You're too young to know that yet. Daniel turned then, his expression more sad than angry. Mom didn't think so. That name, Mom, hit Richard like a slap. His jaw locked, his throat suddenly dry. She's gone, he said, voice low. And thinking like her won't bring her back. Daniel's small fists clenched on the arms of his chair. No. But forgetting what she taught you won't help either. Richard's gaze hardened again, the armor sliding back into place. This conversation is over. You'll apologize to me for running off tomorrow. He turned toward the door. Behind him, Daniel said quietly, she didn't even ask for anything, Dad. She just helped. Why can't you see that? Richard paused, his hand on the doorknob. His reflection stared back at him in the polished brass, tired eyes, rain lines still drying on his coat. He wanted to say something. Anything. But instead, he opened the door and left. Later that night, he sat alone in his study. The room smelled of paper, leather, and whiskey. The only sound was the steady ticking of the grandfather clock and the faint patter of rain on the tall windows. He reached for his desk drawer and pulled out a photograph, one he hadn't looked at in months. It was from a foundation event years ago. Evelyn stood beside him, radiant, holding Daniel's small hand as cameras flashed. He remembered how proud she'd been of the foundation's work, how she'd pushed him to help, to feel again after his business consumed him. Money isn't worth anything if it can't fix hearts, she'd said once. He'd laughed at the time. Now, he couldn't remember the sound of his own laughter. On the desk, beneath the photo, sat a newspaper clipping, something his assistant had printed for him earlier that week. Hale Foundation expands outreach to inner-city schools. It should have made him proud. Instead, he felt hollow. The words looked like someone else's life. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. Images from the night before flashed uninvited, the girl's trembling hands, the broken umbrella, the look in her eyes when he'd accused her. It hadn't been fear alone. It was something deeper. Hurt. He took another sip of his drink, but it only burned his throat. In the quiet, a sound echoed faintly from the hall, wheels turning against wood. Then a soft knock. Come in, he said. The door opened. Daniel rolled in, holding something small in his lap, the sketch, now pressed between a heavy book to keep it flat. I fixed it, Daniel said quietly. I didn't want it to get ruined. Richard frowned. Why? Because it's from her, Daniel replied simply. He set it carefully on the desk, smoothing out the wrinkles. Richard looked down at the drawing, the tiny details, the smiling faces beneath the umbrella, and for a second, something twisted in his chest. He almost said, thank you. Almost. But old habits are stronger than guilt. He just nodded once. You should go to bed. Daniel looked disappointed but said nothing. He turned his chair and left, the soft sound of wheels fading down the hall. Richard stared at the drawing long after the boy was gone. Rain streaked down the window beside him, blurring the lights of the city. For the first time in years, he realized, the silence wasn't peace. It was punishment. 2 days later, the city glimmered under a rare break in the rain. The storm had left behind bright puddles and clear skies, the kind that trick people into thinking everything's fine again. Amara walked along the crowded downtown sidewalk, clutching something wrapped carefully in brown paper. The corners of the yellow umbrella peeked through. She'd spent hours fixing it again, patching the torn edge with pieces of plastic and tape. It wasn't perfect, but it looked whole enough to keep the rain out, for now. Inside the package lay something else too, the blue scarf Daniel had dropped that night near the curb. She'd found it when she went back for her groceries. The scarf still smelled faintly like soap and cologne, like something from a world she'd never touch. Her plan wasn't complicated. She'd go to the Hale Foundation's main office, ask the receptionist to give it to Daniel, and leave. No fuss. No words. Just closure. But as she turned the corner, she stopped cold. The street ahead was lined with cars, lights, and a sea of people in formal clothes. Cameras flashed from every angle, reporters calling names she didn't recognize. A large banner stretched across the plaza. Hale Foundation Annual Children's Charity Gala. Her stomach twisted. Through the glass doors of the hotel, she could already see him, Richard Hale, tall, polished, greeting donors with a practiced smile. Beside him sat Daniel in his wheelchair, dressed in a navy blazer, smiling shyly for the cameras. Amara's heart jumped. Maybe this was her only chance. If she gave it to one of the staff members now, they could return it directly. She stepped closer to the edge of the crowd, tightening her grip on the parcel. A security guard eyed her curiously. She was out of place, no polished shoes, no expensive dress, just her school uniform and patched jacket. Still, she took a breath and moved forward. Inside, the noise grew louder, camera shutters clicking, laughter echoing under chandeliers. A pianist played somewhere near the center, the melody light and graceful. Amara's shoes squeaked softly against the marble floor. She kept her head down, trying to look invisible. Her gaze fixed on Daniel. He noticed her first. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Amara," he whispered, half smiling. She lifted the package slightly and smiled nervously back. Before Daniel could say anything, Richard followed his gaze. His polite expression froze, then hardened. Their eyes met. The noise around them seemed to fade. Amara opened her mouth, trying to explain. I found this. Your son left it that night." Richard took a sharp step forward, voice low but laced with warning. "How did you even get in here?" She flinched, confused. I just wanted to." "Do you realize where you are?" he said louder this time, his voice echoing faintly against the marble. Heads began to turn. A few guests near the buffet looked over, murmuring. A camera light blinked red. Amara swallowed hard. "Please, sir, I'm not here for trouble. I came to give this back." She held out the package, both hands trembling slightly. Richard didn't take it. He didn't even look at it. He looked at her, at the patched coat, the frayed shoes, the shy, pleading face, and saw only risk. "Who let you in?" he demanded again, stepping closer. "You can't just walk into private events. Do you think this is some kind of stunt?" Her cheeks flushed crimson. "No. I swear." Daniel tugged his father's sleeve. "Dad, stop. She's not lying." But Richard barely heard him. His voice was rising, pulling attention like gravity. "Security," he called sharply. "Please escort this girl outside." The guard who'd watched her earlier stepped forward. "Sir, she's just a kid." "Now," Richard snapped. Daniel's voice cracked. "Dad." Amara's throat burned. The stares around her multiplied, expensive eyes, cold, curious, judgmental. Some whispered, some recorded. She tried one last time. "Please, just take it." The scarf. Richard's words cut through her desperation like a blade. "I don't want anything from you." The silence that followed hurt more than the shouting. The security guard gently touched her arm, guiding her back toward the doors. Her feet felt heavy, her vision blurry. Daniel's voice broke behind her. "Dad, she's my friend." But Richard's reply was low, final. "Friends don't appear when cameras do." The doors closed behind her. Outside, the afternoon sun had dimmed behind clouds again. The crowd noise muffled behind the glass, replaced by the soft hum of city traffic. Amara stood on the steps for a long time, the package still clutched in her arms. Her chest felt hollow, not from what he said, but from how easily everyone had believed him. She'd come to do something right. And somehow, it still turned into wrong. A soft wind tugged at the paper around the umbrella. She opened it slightly, staring at the bright yellow fabric beneath the torn edges. In its reflection on the glass doors, she saw her small figure, dripping, out of place, and behind it, Richard Hale's poised silhouette shaking hands and smiling as cameras flashed. Her fingers tightened around the scarf inside the package. She whispered to herself, maybe one day he'll see. Then she turned, walking down the marble steps and into the dimming afternoon. A few drops of rain began to fall again, light and scattered, the sky's quiet reminder that storms never really end, they just pause. She lifted the umbrella, but one rib gave out instantly, sagging again. She laughed softly, without humor, and kept walking. Behind her, inside the glittering hall, Richard accepted another award for Humanitarian of the Year. The applause was loud, warm, convincing. But in Daniel's eyes, barely holding back tears, there was only silence. That night, the rain returned, soft this time, like an apology. The city lights shimmered through it, bending in the puddles along the cracked street outside Amara's apartment building. Inside, the air smelled faintly of soap and boiled rice. A small heater hummed in the corner, struggling against the chill. Amara sat at the little kitchen table again, the yellow umbrella folded beside her, its patched surface glinting faintly under the dim bulb. She stared at the package in front of her, the one she tried to deliver. The scarf was still inside, untouched, wrapped with the same brown paper. Across from her, Lydia washed dishes quietly. The silence between them had weight. Finally, Lydia spoke, her voice gentle but firm. "You came home late again." Amara nodded. "I tried to give something back," she murmured. Her mother turned, drying her hands on a towel. "Back to who?" Amara hesitated, then said softly, "The man from the rain. His son dropped his scarf that night. I wanted to return it." Lydia's brow furrowed. "You mean the one who yelled at you?" Amara nodded again. Her mother sighed, pulling out a chair and sitting beside her. "Baby, some people don't see kindness for what it is. They see threat, or pity, or reminder. Doesn't make your heart wrong, just makes theirs smaller." Amara's eyes dropped to the table. "He thought I was bad." "No," Lydia said, touching her daughter's chin gently so she'd look up. "He thought the world was bad. You just happened to be standing in it." For a moment, Amara managed a small smile. Lydia squeezed her hand. "Now eat something. You can't feed kindness on an empty stomach." But when Lydia turned away to pack her bag for her night shift, Amara stayed still. The scarf seemed to whisper to her, unfinished, unresolved. She pulled a torn sheet of paper from her school notebook and began to write. "Dear Daniel, I don't know if you'll get this, but I wanted to say sorry for coming to that big place. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted you to have your scarf back because it's getting cold again. I'm really happy you're okay. You were very brave that night. You didn't cry even when it was scary. I think your mom must be proud of you. Please tell your dad I didn't mean to make him angry. I know he was just worried about you. My mom worries a lot too. I hope one day he smiles again. The world looks better when people smile." From Amara Daniels. She read it twice, then folded the note carefully and slipped it into the brown parcel with the scarf. On the front, she wrote, "For Daniel Hale, please deliver." The next morning, on her way to school, she stopped at the Hale mansion. The gates were tall, black, and gleaming with rainwater. A security guard in a gray uniform stood by the post, looking both bored and kind. Amara held out the parcel with both hands. "Can you give this to Mr. Hale's son, please? It's from a friend." The guard looked down at her, a little surprised, then softened. "Sure thing, sweetheart. You want to leave your name?" She shook her head quickly. "It's fine. He'll know." The guard smiled faintly and took the parcel. "I'll make sure it gets there." "Thank you," she said quietly, then turned and hurried off before she could lose her nerve. Later that day, Richard Hale sat in his study, surrounded by silence and the smell of paperwork. He was reviewing donation reports, columns of numbers that meant nothing to him anymore. A soft knock came at the door. Yes. It was the guard. "Sir, someone left this for your son this morning." Richard frowned, setting down his pen. "For Daniel?" "Yes, sir." A girl dropped it off. Looked about his age. He hesitated, then held out his hand. "Give it here." The guard obeyed, then left quietly. Richard examined the parcel, the brown paper slightly wrinkled, the handwriting uneven but careful. His instinct was to toss it aside. Another stranger, another risk. But something stopped him, the faint scent of soap, rain, and something sweet. He unfolded the paper slowly. Inside was the blue scarf, clean, neatly folded. And beneath it, a letter. He hesitated again. His thumb brushed over the childish loops of the handwriting before he unfolded it. He read it once. Then again. By the third time, the words blurred. "I hope one day he smiles again." That line hit him like a hand to the chest. He set the paper down carefully, his breath shallow. For a long while, he just sat there, staring at the scarf, the rain outside, the letter. All of it blurring together in one slow wave of something he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't guilt anymore. It was recognition. He'd been angry because that little girl, poor, soaked, trembling, had looked at him the same way Evelyn once had. Not afraid. Not impressed. Just sad for him. And maybe that was what hurt most, being pitted by someone who had nothing but still had more humanity than he did. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. The rain outside picked up, tapping against the window like soft fingertips. After a long silence, he reached for the phone on his desk and called out, "Catherine?" "Yes, sir." "Tell Daniel to come down after dinner." "Yes, Mr. Hale." He placed the receiver down gently and stared at the letter one more time. Then, instead of tucking it away, he folded it neatly and slipped it into the inside pocket of his coat. The smallest hint of a smile ghosted across his lips, fragile, uncertain, but real. The next evening, the mansion was quiet except for the faint hum of rain against the glass. Dinner sat untouched on the long mahogany table, roasted chicken, potatoes, vegetables, all perfectly arranged, all perfectly cold. Daniel wheeled himself into the study where his father sat. Richard's coat hung over the back of the chair, his shirt sleeves rolled up, the faint smell of whiskey in the air. But there was something new on the desk tonight, a folded piece of paper, slightly worn at the edges, placed neatly beside the blue scarf. Daniel noticed immediately. His eyes lit up. "You got it," he said. Richard looked up slowly. "Got what?" "The package. I told the guard to expect something." Daniel rolled closer, his tone careful but hopeful. "Did you read it?" A pause. Then Richard nodded once. "Yes." Daniel smiled, relieved. "Then you know she didn't mean any harm. She was just trying to make things right." Richard didn't answer. He turned the letter over in his hand, reading the first few lines again in silence. The rain outside filled the quiet. Finally, Daniel spoke again, softer this time. "She wrote something nice about you, didn't she?" Richard's jaw tightened. "She doesn't know me." "She doesn't have to," Daniel replied simply. "Sometimes people see who you are before you do." Richard sighed, rubbing his temples. "Daniel, you're a child. You don't understand how complicated the world is." Daniel looked straight at him. No, Dad. You don't understand how simple it can be. The words hung in the air. Richard froze, hands still mid-motion. Daniel continued, his voice trembling a little but full of quiet conviction. Mom used to say that kindness isn't something you earn, it's something you give, even when no one deserves it. He looked at his father's face, the hardened lines, the constant weariness, and his eyes softened. She would have liked Amara, he said. The name landed like a stone in Richard's chest. He leaned back in his chair, eyes closing for a moment. Don't bring your mother into this. But she's already in it, Daniel said. You see her everywhere, the photo in the hallway, the painting in your office, the way you stare at her chair at dinner. His father's eyes snapped open. That's enough. But Daniel didn't stop. He'd carried these words too long. She believed people could change. That's why she started the foundation. Not for awards. Not for cameras. For kids like Amara, kids who don't have anyone to look out for them. Richard opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Daniel's voice wavered, but he kept going. She said helping someone was like holding up a light. The more you hide it, the darker it gets. That's what's happening to you, Dad. You're hiding your light because it hurts to use it. Silence again. Rain traced slow rivers down the glass. Richard's hands trembled slightly as he reached for the letter again. He didn't look at his son when he spoke. His voice came out low, rough around the edges. Do you think she'd forgive me? Daniel blinked. Who? Your mother, Richard said, his tone cracking mid-sentence. If she could see what I've become, would she forgive me for how I treated that girl? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he wheeled closer, stopping beside the desk. I think she already has, he said softly. But maybe it's not her forgiveness you need. Richard turned to look at him. Daniel nodded toward the letter. Maybe it's hers. The words hit hard, simple, but true. For the first time in years, Richard felt his composure splinter. He looked down, unable to meet his son's eyes. You think I can just undo all that? He asked quietly. Daniel smiled sadly. No. But you can start. He picked up the scarf from the desk and placed it gently in his father's hands. She believed in second chances, Dad. You should, too. Later that night, long after Daniel had gone to bed, Richard sat alone in the study again. The room felt different somehow, less like a sanctuary and more like a confessional. He unfolded Amara's letter once more, tracing each word with his thumb. The simple handwriting carried more honesty than any speech he'd ever given. I hope one day he smiles again. That line replayed in his head, over and over. He looked toward the large painting of Evelyn on the wall, her soft eyes, her gentle smile, and whispered, almost inaudible. I think I understand now. His gaze fell to the rain outside, then to the yellow umbrella still propped by the door, the one he hadn't been able to throw away. He rose slowly, walked over, and picked it up. The fabric was still torn in places, but when he opened it, it spread wide enough to cover him completely. For the first time in years, he smiled, small, hesitant, but genuine. The mansion felt a little less cold that night. Not because the storm had stopped, but because something inside him had finally begun to thaw. The next afternoon broke gray and humid, the kind of air that warned of rain before a single drop had fallen. Richard stood by the tall window, coat in hand, staring out at the horizon like a man who'd been waiting his whole life for a storm that never stopped coming. In the hallway behind him, Daniel's voice drifted closer. Are you really going? Richard turned, meeting his son's eyes. Yes. I need to see her. Daniel's brows lifted, hope flickering faintly beneath caution. Do you know where she lives? I asked Catherine to find out, Richard said. The foundation has records of the families in that neighborhood. It wasn't hard. Daniel wheeled forward a little. Then take me with you. Richard hesitated. It's a long drive, Anne. I was there too, Daniel interrupted gently. If she can forgive anyone, she should see us both. Richard studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, he said quietly. We'll go together. The sky opened before they reached the neighborhood, a soft drizzle at first, then steady sheets of rain that made the world blur outside the windshield. The car rolled slowly past rows of worn houses, cracked sidewalks, and flickering streetlights. This was a part of the city Richard's world never touched, the part his foundation claimed to help, yet he'd never once stepped into. They stopped near the corner grocery store. Daniel pointed suddenly. There, he said. That's her. Through the misty rain, Richard saw her, Amara, walking along the narrow street, the familiar yellow umbrella in her hands. Its patched surface glowed like sunlight against the gray. Without thinking, he opened the car door and stepped out. The rain hit him instantly, cold, heavy, relentless. He walked toward her slowly, his shoes splashing in puddles, his coat soaking through within seconds. Amara didn't notice him at first. She was too busy adjusting her umbrella against the wind. But when she looked up, her eyes widened. Her first instinct was fear. She took a half step back, clutching the handle tighter. Sir. Richard stopped a few feet away, breathing hard, rain dripping from his hair and collar. Amara, he said softly. Please, don't run. She didn't. She just stared at him, unsure, guarded, her chin trembling slightly. He could see the confusion in her eyes, the memory of how he'd looked at her that night, not as a person, but as a threat. He swallowed hard. You helped my son, he began. You didn't owe us anything. You didn't ask for anything. And I repaid you with cruelty. Amara blinked, her brows knitting. I didn't want anything back, she murmured. He needed help. That's all. Richard nodded slowly, his throat thickening. I know. And that's exactly what makes what I did unforgivable. Daniel's voice called from behind them. Dad! Richard turned, the driver was helping Daniel out of the car, holding an umbrella above his chair. Let me come closer, Daniel said. When he reached them, he smiled faintly at Amara. Hi again. Her face softened. Hi. Richard turned back to her, his voice trembling with something new, humility. I found your letter, he said. I've read it more times than I can count. Every word was kind. You didn't blame me. You even said you hoped I'd smile again. Amara's cheeks flushed, she looked down. I just wanted to make things right. He nodded. You did. More than you know. Rain began to fall harder, wind whipping the edges of his coat. He took a slow step forward, then did something that made both Daniel and Amara freeze. He knelt. Right there in the flooded street, puddles splashing around his knees, Richard Hale, billionaire, businessman, man of pride, bowed his head to the girl he had once humiliated. I was wrong, he said, voice raw. About you. About people. About what matters. He lifted his gaze, eyes glistening. I thought protecting my son meant protecting him from everyone. But what he needed wasn't my shield, it was my heart. The rain blurred everything, even his tears. He held out his hand to her. Can you forgive me? Amara hesitated, not out of anger, but disbelief. No one had ever apologized to her before, not like this. Her small hand trembled as she reached out. When their fingers touched, the rain seemed to soften. She nodded. Yes, sir. I forgive you. Something broke inside him then, the quiet kind of break that mends everything after. Daniel smiled, wiping his eyes with the back of his sleeve. I told you she would. Richard chuckled through the tears. You were right, son. You always are. Amara smiled shyly, then opened her umbrella wider, tilting it to cover all three of them. "Here," she said softly. "We can share." The umbrella wasn't big enough, but it didn't matter. The sight of the three of them, the girl, the boy, the man, standing close under the battered yellow canopy, laughing quietly through the rain, was enough to make the moment whole. From across the street, a passerby paused to watch, just another city stranger, but even they couldn't help but smile. For the first time, Richard didn't mind being seen. For the first time, he didn't care about image, or reputation, or perfection. He cared only about truth. And in that truth, there was warmth. As the rain began to ease, Daniel reached for Amara's hand. "You fixed more than my chair that night," he said softly. Amara blinked. "What do you mean?" He smiled. "You fixed my dad." They all laughed then, a small, quiet laugh, the kind that shakes the sadness out of the air. Above them, the clouds broke just enough to let through a sliver of sunlight. The yellow umbrella caught it like gold. A week later, the city looked different. Maybe it was just the light, warmer, clearer after days of rain, or maybe it was something else entirely. The streets where puddles once swallowed reflections now shimmered with quiet life, children playing, vendors smiling, colors returning to walls that once looked gray. For the first time in years, Richard Hale wasn't sitting behind a glass wall of an office or posing under a chandelier. He stood outside an old, abandoned building in the heart of the district, the kind of place his foundation used to send money to revitalize, without ever truly visiting. But now, he was here, sleeves rolled up, rain boots on, clipboard tucked under his arm. Beside him, Amara and Daniel watched curiously as workers unloaded boxes of paint, tools, and supplies. The sign above the building's entrance, barely visible beneath layers of dust, read, "Haven Arts and Learning Center, closed." Amara tilted her head. "What is this place?" Richard smiled faintly. "It used to be a community art center. My wife started it years ago before she passed away." Daniel looked up. "Mom's project?" He nodded. "Yes. She believed every child should have a place to dream, especially the ones the world forgets about." Amara's eyes widened. "You're reopening it?" Richard looked at her, his expression soft. "Not just reopening. We're rebuilding it. Together." He handed her a small card, gold-embossed letters that read, "The Evelyn Hale Creative Scholarship, in honor of kindness." And beneath it, in smaller print, "First recipient, Amara Daniels." Amara blinked, her hands trembling. "Wait, me?" Daniel grinned. "Of course you." Tears pricked her eyes as she looked up at Richard. "I don't know what to say." He smiled gently. "You don't have to say anything. You've already said everything that mattered, that night, when you stopped to help." Amara's mother, Lydia, who had been standing nearby watching uncertainly, stepped forward, disbelief written all over her face. "Mr. Hale, this is too much." He shook his head. "No, Mrs. Daniels. It's not enough. Your daughter reminded me of something I forgot, that generosity isn't about money, it's about humanity." Lydia pressed a hand over her mouth, eyes glistening. "Thank you." He smiled softly. "Thank her. She saved my family." Over the next few weeks, the once empty building transformed. The broken windows were replaced, the walls painted with bright murals, and laughter began to echo through the halls again. Amara spent her afternoons there after school, sketching on wide tables, learning colors and shapes she'd only ever seen in dreams. Sometimes Daniel joined her, painting clumsy rainbows and stick figures that made them both laugh. And often, Richard watched from the doorway, coat off, sleeves rolled, hands stained faintly with paint, smiling more easily than anyone had seen him do in years. One afternoon, Amara stood back to admire a large mural they'd finished on the front wall, a painting of three figures under a glowing yellow umbrella, standing in the rain but smiling through it. At the bottom, in Daniel's neat handwriting, were the words, "Kindness is stronger than storms." Richard stepped up beside her, studying the mural quietly. "It's beautiful," he said. Amara smiled, brushing a bit of blue paint off her fingers. "It's our story." He nodded. "Yes. And I hope it reminds people of theirs." Weeks turned into months, and the Foundation's gala invitations began to change tone. Instead of black-tie dinners, they now hosted community fairs at the center. Families, artists, children, all gathered in one place without barriers of wealth or pride. Reporters who once photographed Richard for his polished image now captured something real, a man kneeling beside children as they painted, his white shirt flecked with color, his laughter unguarded. He'd donated money before. But this was the first time he'd given himself. One quiet evening, when the day's noise had faded and the last rays of sunlight spilled across the art center floor, Richard found Amara sitting by the window with her sketchbook. She looked up as he approached. "Working on something new?" he asked. She nodded shyly, turning the page toward him. It was a drawing of the night they met, the flooded street, the broken umbrella, the headlights, but this time, she had drawn something different. In the sky above them, faint rays of light broke through the clouds. Richard looked at it for a long moment, then said quietly, "You made it better than it was." Amara smiled softly. "Because it is better now." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, her letter, still creased but preserved. "I still read this sometimes," he admitted. "When I forget how far we've come." She giggled. "It's all wrinkly now." He chuckled. "Wrinkled things are often the ones worth keeping." Daniel rolled in just then, holding 3 cups of lemonade. "We're celebrating, remember?" Richard raised an eyebrow. "Celebrating what?" Daniel grinned. "Dad smiled today before coffee." Amara burst out laughing, and Richard joined in, shaking his head. "That's worth a celebration, I suppose." Outside, the sun dipped low, casting everything in a golden haze. Amara stepped out with her yellow umbrella, now repaired perfectly, no rips or holes, its color glowing like a lantern against the dusk. She tilted it toward Richard and Daniel as they joined her by the steps. "Come on," she said playfully. "You'll get wet if it rains." Richard looked up at the sky, not a single cloud in sight, then back at her and smiled. "After everything we've been through, I think I'd like the rain." Amara grinned, twirling the umbrella once. "Then maybe just a little." They stood together at the entrance, the billionaire, his son, and the little girl who changed everything, laughing softly under a sunlit umbrella that no longer needed to shield anyone from storms. And yet, somehow, it still did. 1 year later, the Hale Foundation building no longer stood as a monument of marble and ego, it had become a living space, filled with color, laughter, and second chances. What was once cold and quiet now pulsed with life. A banner stretched across the courtyard entrance. Hale Foundation Annual Art Fair, celebrating stories that heal. Children raced between booths carrying brushes and clay sculptures. Music played from the stage, mingling with the buzz of conversation. The air smelled faintly of rain, even though the sky was clear, as if the city remembered the night everything had changed. Near the main display table, a crowd gathered around a framed painting. It showed a man, a boy, and a little girl standing together under a yellow umbrella, faces lit by the glow of streetlights and forgiveness. The artist's name, written neatly at the bottom corner, Amara Daniels, age 11. Applause filled the room as Amara stood beside her painting, cheeks red, eyes shining. Lydia wiped tears discreetly from her eyes, her pride too big to contain. Catherine, the housekeeper, clapped from the front row. And just a few steps away, Richard Hale and Daniel watched in silence, both smiling, both changed. When the applause died down, Richard stepped forward. A microphone was pressed gently into his hand. For a moment, he said nothing, only looked at the girl whose heart had turned his world upside down. Then he spoke, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "A year ago," he began, "I was a man who thought kindness was a transaction. That people only gave when they had something to gain. I believed protecting my heart meant never opening it." He paused, glancing at Daniel. "But a little girl I didn't know proved me wrong." The audience listened closely, reporters, parents, children, strangers. "She found my son in the rain," he continued, "and helped him when I wasn't there to. She asked for nothing, expected nothing, and still gave everything she had. I thought I was saving the world with money. But she saved me with kindness." He turned toward Amara. "Amara, you reminded me of someone I loved dearly, someone who believed the smallest good deed can change the biggest heart. You reminded me that we are all the same in the rain." The room fell utterly silent. Amara blinked fast, trying to hide the tears in her eyes. Richard smiled softly. "Today, this art center isn't just reopening, it's reborn. For every child who dreams, for every parent who hopes, and for every person who's ever felt unseen. This place belongs to you." He stepped back, handing the microphone to Daniel. Daniel grinned, his voice lighter, freer. "And if you ever see someone who looks like they need a little help." He glanced at Amara and smiled. "Don't wait for someone else to stop. Be the one who does." Laughter rippled through the crowd, warm and genuine. As the ceremony ended, Richard walked outside to the courtyard, looking up at the afternoon sky. Clouds were gathering again, soft, silver-edged. He chuckled quietly. "Seems the rain's coming back." Amara ran up beside him, holding her bright yellow umbrella. "Then we should be ready." He looked down at her. "Still keeping that old thing?" "It's not old," she said, opening it proudly. "It's just, experienced." Daniel joined them, laughing. "I think we all are." The first drops began to fall, gentle, refreshing, not angry this time. Amara lifted the umbrella above them all, and for a moment, the three stood in a perfect circle of warmth amid the drizzle. Children shrieked and ran through the rain nearby, painting streaks of color on the wet pavement. Lydia laughed, chasing them with a towel. Catherine carried boxes inside, shaking her head but smiling all the same. Richard looked around, really looked, and realized something he'd forgotten for years. Life didn't need to be controlled to be beautiful. It only needed to be shared. As the rain deepened, Amara leaned closer. "Mr. Hale?" "Yes." "Do you still read my letter sometimes?" He smiled, reaching into his coat pocket. "Every week." She tilted her head, curious. "Why?" "Because it reminds me of the night everything started," he said. "And the night I stopped pretending I wasn't broken." Amara smiled softly. "But you're not broken now." "No," he agreed, glancing toward Daniel. "Because someone fixed me." The boy smirked. "Technically, she did." Richard laughed, ruffling his son's hair. "Then maybe she should be in charge of the foundation." Amara's eyes widened. "Really?" He winked. "Maybe not yet. But one day, I'll need someone brave enough to take over." She laughed, hiding behind the umbrella handle. "Then I'll start practicing." As evening approached, the rain softened into mist. The courtyard lights flickered on, reflecting across puddles like tiny stars. The last guests drifted away, but the sound of joy lingered. Inside the gallery, Amara's painting glowed beneath a single spotlight. 3 figures beneath the umbrella, the same symbol that began it all, still standing strong against the storm. Beside it, on a small plaque, were the words Richard had chosen for the exhibit. "The night a little girl helped my son, she saved more than him. She saved me." Later, long after the event ended, Richard stood alone at the doorway of the art center. He listened to the quiet, not the emptiness he once knew, but the peaceful kind, the kind that breathes. The rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, new. He closed his eyes and whispered into the silence. "Thank you, Evelyn. I found her." The final shot. Amara, Daniel, and Richard walking down the street together under the yellow umbrella. The camera tilts upward as they disappear into the glow of the city lights, reflections of gold rippling in the puddles below. The voiceover fades in, calm, hopeful, final. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness is enough to change a life. Sometimes, it changes two. And sometimes, it saves the one who least expected it. Text fades onto the screen against the image of the umbrella turning slowly in the breeze. Share this if you still believe kindness can change the world.